The Council on Black Minnesotans gets credits for saying, let's put this into state law.
This bill, the Urban Agriculture Bill, is the first time in really, I think, the history of the state of Minnesota that urban farming will get.
What would happen if the bill did not pass? I think it would say a lot about.
I'm State Representative Karen Clark, and I represent 3 inner-city neighborhoods in South Minneapolis: Phillips neighborhood, Whittier neighborhood, and Stevens Square neighborhood. And in the last 2 years, I also have a little part of Potterhorn Park neighborhood. I've been involved in urban farming and organic farming in particular for about 10, 12 years. But the Council on Black Minnesotans gets credits for saying, let's put this into state law and try to see if we can't have a specific understanding of what urban agriculture is, support it, make sure that urban farmers have a chance to have some of the access to some of the same programs that rural farmers do. And just, I represent low-income people who live in communities where the access to fresh, affordable, and organic food in particular just is not plentiful. And there's a movement that's been growing, and I'm happy to be part of it in several ways, both as a state legislator with this hat on, but also in my work with the Women's Environmental Institute. We do organic farming training and have a farm with the CSA, and have been very instrumental in helping start a couple of urban farms in South Minneapolis, and with a whole group of folks, both that we're working on the food justice agenda, I guess I'd say it that way. This is a food justice issue. Okay, and this will be brief because this is a very complex situation. But what I can tell you is that my mentor on this is Will Allen, who's, as you know, kind of one of the people who helped us understand the possibilities and the vision for urban farming in this country, beginning with his home base in Milwaukee. But one of the things that Will Allen says is it's unethical for us to just assume that we can go throw some seeds on the ground in an urban area and grow food there, because there is de facto contamination there because of the years and years of everything from contamination from industry, contamination from traffic, specific things that have landed in our soil, lead, arsenic, these kinds of things. We have to assume that the soil needs to be cleaned, that it is contaminated. And so part of the reason for, in our bill, we talk about organic farming. We do want to make sure that our urban folks that we are working with have the same right to good, clean soil, high nutrient soil. And so the ways that we get that is, starts with, in the very beginning, we helped bring some soil in, organic soil in, certified organic soil into our folks we were working with in South Minneapolis, for example, at Little Earth of United Tribes, and we brought in compost, and all of that. But now, what really needs to happen is that needs to be homegrown. To be sustainable, we need that soil to be homegrown, and that's what composting can provide. And Will Allen's large-scale composting in an urban setting is a very good example of what we can do, and that's kind of some of what the organizations I've been working with have been trying to do. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully. It's really an evolving practice, and we need more buy-in from some of our local governments, and we've had to fight with the state government over access to being able to transport. In Minnesota, we had a law that would not allow us to transport food products, excess food waste across certain areas. It's crazy. It's taken about 4 or 5 years now to challenge that, and we now are at a different place with that, and so we should be able to grow more good soil for our inner cities, urban farms, as well as our rural farms.
This bill, the Urban Agriculture Bill, is the first time in really, I think, the history of the state of Minnesota that urban farming will get its due recognition. When you consider the fact that in 2050, 10,000 people will be on this planet, food resources, land access will become a very serious issue at that time. Minnesota is jump-starting its effort to preserve available land and space for the production of food. Immediately, what this bill does is it helps communities right now that are struggling with fresh food access, that are dealing with food deserts, to create a system of subsistence for themselves and making sure that their kids can have an alternative to what's in the marketplace right now. We think it's a very important thing that the state of Minnesota is willing to invest funds in this demonstration project to bring the urban agriculture movement really full circle and making it as important as rural farming that occurs, which is important, but also making that investment to nurture a new farm attitude. And we're particularly excited that it's tapping into the African heritage community, because I think everybody understands that historically here in this country we have played a significant role in the development of the agriculture industry itself. So for our community, it's re-engaging us to a greater extent, but also putting us in a position to take on the challenges of producing food in an urban environment. Urban farming, one of the other challenges is the using traditional farming methods within an urban community that have had to endure incredible environmental damage. Lead would be one of those big considerations, from paint to vehicles that had to use it and pump it into the soil for years. In addition to that, manufacturing facilities that have permeated urban communities and seepage of various types of chemicals into the soil can be a challenge to do traditional methods. That's why things like tiered greenhouses and aquaculture and hydroponics and aeroponics and rooftop efforts then become important alternatives to growing food in an urban setting. There are encase farms where they encase the soil and bring in new fresh soil to grow food as well. I believe one of the big components around the development of urban farming activities has to be testing soil conditions, both the soil that is imported for alternative use as well as existing soil. There are methodologies that folks have used for years to help purify soil to make it ready to grow healthy food. In addition to that, composting is becoming a big issue and alternative for producing appropriate soil for growing in urban communities.
Okay. I think urban farming is something that's been kind of ignored historically. And if you think of the history of like segregation and of health disparities that have developed throughout the past few years, even, I think it makes a lot of sense to push through such a bill to provide greater access to healthier, fresh foods for populations that may not have always had that access to the fresh foods. I think this bill is going to, in a way, decentralize the power and the money that has been always segregated at the top for those who benefit off of, say, people who don't have fresh food access. And I think that in terms of their benefit, it's just going to benefit us all. I see that for inner city populations, whether you're thinking about like Black youth, you're thinking about Native youth, that there's been a conglomeration of these like fast food restaurants. There's been a conglomeration of in many ways processed foods. You can say GMO foods that scientifically there's been a conversation started on the fact that putting that into your body in terms of a longevity of time is just naturally going to break down the human body and lead to a shorter lifespan, a lower quality of life. And from what I've observed in working with the different populations, say in North Minneapolis, you could say even like East St. Paul, that you see all kinds of complications arising within families' lives. What would happen if the bill did not pass? I think it would say a lot about our values, or lack of values, and where we might really need to take a hard look at why in the 21st century, in progressive society, do we not value low-income populations, marginalized racial and ethnic populations, and why do we not put value on ourselves and in being aware of what we're putting into our bodies?
I'm Kathy Ehlers. I live in the northeast Minneapolis area, and we started a co-op there when one had not been started for 20 years in the Twin Cities. Mostly co-ops had been closing. And a group of people decided that in order to bring some new life to Central Avenue, as well as bring healthful food to that area, that we needed to start a co-op. And it started off with virtual memberships. People would put $100 down, and we put that in an escrow account. And it took 10, 12 years, and we finally opened the store. And it's still going. It's in the process of expansion right now. There are several touch points for me as far as supporting the urban farms bill. One of them is having grown gardens, not only as a kid with my family, but also in community gardens in Minneapolis. And I think the value is not only having a chance to grow food, but also to have a connection with nature and to have a place where kids can see and participate in that. I have two daughters, and when they were growing up, the plants would not have produced any fruit or anything yet, it'd just be the leaves, but they could give a little tour and say, oh, those are the carrots, those are the eggplants. I mean, they knew what the leaves looked like. They were well familiar with all of the plants. And they had seen the process. You plant a seed, you water it, and it eventually starts sprouting. It's pretty cool. Kids get into that. So it's a great opportunity to bring kids back to nature. And I think it's a community building activity too. Community gardening is a community building activity. There are committees, and we work through our differences, and we celebrate together in the garden and have suppers and things like that. Kids don't think about food coming from the earth generally. So any kind of urban agriculture is a great thing. It puts them back in touch with the natural cycles and what keeps us all going, the soil and the other components.
North Minneapolis is going green. Give us a call and learn what we mean. Where once lie urban blight, now sits luscious garden sites, gardens without borders, classrooms without walls, architects of our own destinies, access to food, justice for all. Good day, my name is Michael Chaney. I'm an activist, organizer. I don't consider myself a farmer. I consider myself a freedom fighter. Well, the name of the organization that I represent and work with and have been working very diligently the last 5 years is Project Sweetie Pie. We started in 2010, January 2010, in response to the threatened closing of North High. There were some administrators who felt that North High had served its purpose and that the best way to advance education was to close the school. Some of myself and others, part of a group called Afro Eco, we were one day sitting around commiserating about that, and we started that in all good conscience. We couldn't sit back and watch that happen. And so we decided to do something about that. And through that those conversations, we birthed an idea called Project Sweetie Pie. It started off with a catchy slogan, then went to North High, who had a green room there that had been fallow for 10 years. And so I approached the school and asked them if I could get the kids in North Minneapolis to start growing sweet potatoes and other vegetables, would they be could we use this green room and start growing? So January 2010, we started growing sweet potatoes in that green room. That were later in the spring were transported out to, we had 5 garden sites. Neighborhood residents just say, hey, I want to help the kids. I have a lot, you'd like to use it. I have a backyard. So the first year we had 5 gardens, 50 partners. Second year we had 10 gardens, 75 partners. Third year we had an initiative that I call Gardens Galore. We had 25 gardens and 130 partners. And those partners were as diverse as Burpee Seeds gave me over 10,000 packs of seeds that I was handing out like they were breath mints. So see ourselves as kind of the Johnny Appleseed of urban farming. And through that course of that work, realized that there were a lot of strict regulations and restrictions that were really going to undermine any and all of our efforts. And so we saw clearly that here was an opportunity. We had to go to bring it to a policy level. And so this urban ag bill that you refer to was born out of that process. Approached the Council on Black Minnesotans and talking about what do we have as a Council on Black Minnesota works on a legislative slate for African Americans across the state. And at that time, they had no urban farm agenda. And so myself and Sam Grant and some other folks challenged that and said, we need an urban farm agenda. And so through that process, we've lobbied and got it involved to the point where it is now, where the urban Council on Black Minnesotans advanced it and brought it to Karen Clark to be the author of this important legislation, which are currently, and then it's still even through the process of revision, House number 153 and House Finance 179. Looking at access to land and setting aside blocks of land. Without the land you can't expand, and so it was critical because in many cities, some don't have anything regarding land usage, but some of them, a lot of the cities, you can lease land from city vacant lots, but it's only for 1 year at a slot. And so given all the investment that urban farmers have to make, that really circumvented the efforts of urban farmers. And so we didn't feel we were going to be able to get it done on the city level, on the county level. So we decided to bring it on the state level and impose that. So that's one of the bills. The other bill is about grants and loans. And so, again, we wanted to, it started off with populations of 60,000 or more, that land be set aside for urban farming. And the companion bill to that states that there be grants and loans for urban farmers, organizations that want to do demonstration projects. It's critical legislation. It's landmark legislation, the first of its kind in the nation. And we see it as a real legitimizing of urban farming. Ag in itself, the big boys like big toys, right? And so and this goes forward to legitimizing our efforts, because in many respects, people kind of minimize our efforts as poo-poo it, in fact, as, gardening is the work of women and children. And we want to change that stereotypical perception of the world and realize that all people's ideas, visions, dreams are of value. Well, Karamu Garden is a unique example of, we hear all this rhetoric that it takes a village to raise a child. One of the things that we've tried to do with Project Sweetie Pie is really demonstrate that and really, again, bring forth some new initiatives and institutions that really can be a showcase for the community and demonstrate for people locally and across the state and across the country in terms of the values and the virtues of urban farming. And I see it even more. What can we do to build community? And so the garden becomes a very good example. I like to use the analogy of a petri dish. A petri dish is where you grow culture, and that's what we're doing in the garden. If you believe what some people believe in terms of the Garden of Eden, if it all came apart in the garden, then we're almost like time travelers. We're going back in time and coming forward. Should we do different so that we could build a better, more compassionate world? And so with Project Sweetie Pie, again, and all of its partners and all of the friendships and collaboration, it's really quite a major paradigm shift. It's really building indigenous leadership, it's building movements, and even legislation that's birthed from the ground up. That is really making this really all this work transformative. And so that to me is the real value. The Karamu Garden is just one example. It's not a community garden. From our vantage point, a community garden, even though they're great and they bring fresh food, they really replicate the system that we already have in place. Many people in community gardeners are already landowners. There are people there, and that this community garden is just an extension of them already what they've got. They don't want to do it in their backyard, so they come outside. And so that's really not all that transformative. What transformative means is how can we get people who've been socially engineered to be left out to be consumers and not producers? How can we bring them into the American dream? How can we get them to become producers and not just consumers? And so the Karamu Garden, a good example of that, is a communal garden, meaning we don't care if you planted the food or not. All we want you to do is start taking advantage of the benefits of that. So you'll find no fences. You'll find, you'll not see anybody criticizing somebody because they come into that garden to pick the vegetables from that. In fact, that's precisely what we want to do. So that's what I mean when I say gardens without borders.